Hi everyone, Paul from Lightbox Architecture. So today, my top 5 tips for not getting your planning application refused. So, planning is a nightmare and a bit of a minefield to navigate when you're looking to extend your home or to build a new build. So I thought I would give you my top 5 tips of what not to do when applying for planning permission. So you can follow the guidelines to the letter and still get refused planning permission. But if you disregard the guidelines and you don't follow the rules, then you will definitely have no chance of getting permission for your project. Now, if anybody tells you they can guarantee you planning permission in the UK, then they're either lying or they don't understand the planning system and how it works. The published planning guidelines are only guidance. They are not obliged to approve your planning application. The process of planning is uncertain with no guarantees, although there is an element of discretion built into the planning system. So if you're considering building or extending your home, then in most cases you will have to apply for planning permission. Now, sometimes this feels a very laborious process to go through, especially if you don't understand the planning system and you've never built anything before or extended your home. Well, although we have planning policy and framework set out by the government and local plans and policy that the local councils use, these only serve as a guideline for local planning authorities. Therefore, these policies are open to interpretation. Now, hopefully, by me giving you my top 5 tips, this will reduce the chances of you receiving a planning refusal. So, my first tip is building contrary to the local plan. Now, every authority is required by law to create a local plan. This document sets out how the development and the infrastructure can best benefit your local area. Now, if you're looking to build a home in the green belt, or you're looking at converting a commercial building to a residential, or you're looking at a barn conversion, then the local plan matters and you need to read this document. The local authority may already have decided that this type of development is not in the local area's best interest, and therefore it won't matter who you get to put your planning application in, how well they've designed it, that simply the planners will refuse it. Now, do your research, and if you're considering a development, contact the local authority, contact the local planners, have a chat with them and ask them about the local plan and discuss this with them. Equally, most local authorities now, you can download the local plan from their website and have a browse through it. Now, this is just doing your due diligence to try and find out a little bit more information before you start your project. The last thing that you want to do is start a project and realise that you're not going to get planning approval for it. So go check out the local plan. Now, my second tip, and this is one that comes up a lot, is the negative effect on character and appearance when you're putting in your planning application. A proposal's effect on an area's character and appearance is another frequent issue that comes up all the time with planning applications. This is one of those issues in which the planning in the UK can become very subjective. Proposals that are felt to alter the pattern of development in particular areas are generally not well received. So if, for instance, you have a street with all of the same roofs on, for instance, a hip roof, and you decide that you want to put in a mansard roof because that gives you a bigger area within your loft, the planners may not receive that particularly well because they will look that it is out of character and the appearance doesn't look similar to that in the rest of the street. Now, this can be particularly difficult when you're in places like conservation areas, and there may well be a document setting out with the local authority exactly what they want to see in that area. So it's worth mentioning for this reason that it's most likely found for projects in conservation areas, but it may crop up elsewhere. This is a particular source of tension is back garden developments or backland developments. Now we see these quite a lot in London where space is a premium. So developments in the garden areas of properties, and as I discussed before, changing the character of the roof. If it's out of character with the existing street scene, then they tend to receive a response from the planners, and that is not always a favourable response and may well lead to a refusal. So my next tip is overshadowing. This can create problems with proposed extensions and trigger refusals from planners. Overshadowing relates to the idea that both neighbouring properties have the right to sunlight and natural daylight. Most extensions cast some overshadowing, as nothing would ever get built otherwise. Now, local authorities again produce guidance on acceptable overshadowing of properties and how that can be measured. We have experienced in the past where proposed extensions may block or limit light to a side window that is the only source of natural daylight to a habitable room. So I've had this on a project before where we proposed an extension 2-storey, and the planners came back and indicated that they were looking to refuse the proposed development. Now, the reason for that was that the neighbouring property had a kitchen window that was their only window to a habitable room on the side of the building. Now, the planners didn't like the fact of overshadowing, that this then would cause the loss of natural daylight to that particular room for the neighbours. Now, that didn't mean that we didn't get planning permission, because there was a work around that, and so we did manage to get the client planning permission for the full extension, what we originally set out. But that did take a little bit of work, and we did have to work with putting up an application in for a particular extension and then coming back and doing a revision. But this isn't the best way to approach it. So that's my top tip for overshadowing. This is something that you need to consider and something that you need to consider with your neighbours. Now, my next tip is loss of amenity. Now, again, this is a bit of a contentious one and a very vague term. And it's another frequent reason leading to planning permission refusal, and is the negative impact on the neighbouring amenity. And this is a loss to your neighbour's amenity. Now, this isn't the amenity space in your property. Remember, this is the loss of amenity to your neighbour's property. Now, if you don't work for a council or you haven't got a planning degree, you may well be asking, what does amenity mean? And the answer isn't any less confusing. So we're talking about amenity space. It covers a range of functions inside the boundaries of your property, but outside your building. It takes in a collective of rather varied things, including balconies, gardens, parking, and security features. But in this case, it basically means the quality of life of your neighbours. Everything is down to interpretation by the planners, but you need to consider any impacts on your neighbour's amenity. Now, fact, local authorities are obliged to protect the living standards of local residents. So make sure you follow the local design guide, and they will give you an idea of exactly what kinds of designs are likely to be accepted in your area. So again, this is something you need to consider if you don't want to get that planning refusal. So tip number 4, overlooking and loss of privacy. If you're building an extension and you have neighbours, you can expect that the neighbours have some reasonable expectation of what you're proposing to build that doesn't impact their privacy. Now, specifically, this is the loss to your neighbour's amenity. This is looking at the space around your property. Now, if you lived in a terrace house, you would expect that there is a degree of overlooking because lots of the properties all look into the back gardens of each other. Now, if you had a detached property or you had a detached mansion that was set on a nice piece of ground, you would not expect the planners to allow your neighbours then to build something that then is looking over into your garden or your space, and therefore they're impacting on your privacy within your property. Now, a simple example is somebody building an extension that has a window that's looking directly over into your neighbour's property. Or we look at balconies Now, balconies are probably frowned upon by planners to an extent, and if you are looking at building a balcony, the general consensus is that when you stand out on your balcony area at the back of your property, that you're generally going to be overlooking into your neighbour's property or be able to see into your neighbouring properties, and that's going to have an impact on their privacy. Now, a lot of the time when planners agree and approve a balcony area, they will generally ask for a screen at the side. So the screens either at one side or both sides will then stop you from being able to impact the neighbour's privacy that you can see over into their gardens. But equally, that takes away the whole reason for having a balcony, that you want that open space to have a look onto. Now, equally, planners aren't too keen on Juliet balconies either, and sometimes can be a bone of contention. And they may well ask you to either remove that or to look at an alternative. Obviously, this depends on the application, where the property is, and where it's located. Now, there are guidelines with regards to how close an extension can be to an existing neighbour's window. Now, this is typically 18 metres, but these are set out in the planning guidelines and documentation, which you're able to look at and digest before you look at submitting your planning application. Now, planners are open to a element of discretion here, so it does depend on what the impact is, where your neighbours are located, maybe how far your extension goes down the garden, how much impact it has on the neighbours, but also what else has been built and constructed and approved in the local area. So always think about overlooking and loss of privacy to your neighbours. Now, my fifth tip is how to limit objections from your neighbours. Now, I always say to clients, the best thing to do if you are considering an extension or building something at your home is to go round and have a chat with your neighbours. Now, there's nothing worse than your neighbour that you have known for many years, that you've lived next door to, and all of a sudden, one morning you pick up your post and you get a letter from the local planning authority that your neighbour has decided to build maybe a large extension. And you stand back and think, well, why didn't the neighbours come round and speak to me? Why didn't they let us know that they were building an extension? Now, straight away, that may well get you a little bit infuriated. So then you start to look at what they're proposing to do, and you may have some objections. You are then more likely to object to that planning application than if the neighbour had come round, sat down with you, discussed their project, and let you know beforehand what they were proposing to do before that letter landed on your doorstep. Now, like I say, I always suggest to clients to go around and speak to their neighbours beforehand, because it gives them the chance to tell the neighbours what they're proposing to do, discuss their project. Even better if you've got a set of plans that you can take round so you have a point of discussion. That way the neighbour can let you know if there's anything that he feels he's not happy with or has an objection about. And it may be that there's a simple solution that you can agree something with the neighbour that, for instance, you're not going to put a particular window in that position, or you're going to make it a little bit smaller or a little bit higher. And that may well make your planning application sail through and get an approval without having objections from your neighbours. Equally, it also sets their mind at ease that they have had some kind of consideration in what you're proposing to build. Now, equally, not everybody gets on with their neighbours, and it may be that even though you've planned an extension, that the neighbour doesn't like it and he wants to object anyway. Now, if this doesn't resolve your neighbour's issues or objections, and the most common objection that we see is that the new building will block my view. Geez, what are we going to do? Well, let me let you into a little secret. No one has the right to a view, otherwise nothing would get built. So in UK planning law, nobody has a right to a view. So with all the stuff that we've discussed above, you might be thinking, do you know what? Let's not bother with the planning system. We'll just go down the permitted development route. We'll build an extension that falls within permitted development, and therefore none of the neighbours are going to complain. We're not going to have to deal with all of the items above. But please don't design or build something just to fit with permitted development rights. don't limit yourself to something that you actually may not want, just to navigate around the planning process. Now, we've carried out thousands of planning applications over the years for extensions and residential projects, and the majority of the time we get approval for these. There are very, very few that we don't get planning approval for. So this is probably a project or an extension that you will probably only do once to your property, and so therefore you need to make sure what you have designed or what you have built suits what your needs are and is designed the way you want it to be. So therefore, go through the planning route, deal with the planning. Don't be fearful of the planning department, as you know, we have a high success rate of getting our planning applications approved. Now, my best advice would be seek professional advice on any extension or development that you're looking to undertake. Therefore, you will have the best knowledge and the best advice of how to navigate the planning route and ultimately obtain the extension that you want. Now, if this content's been really useful, then please hit the subscribe button, because it helps our channel to grow and helps me to keep deliver this great content to you. And equally, click a like. If you have any comments, drop them in the comments box and I'll try and get back to you. Equally, if you have a project in mind and you're looking for some planning advice, then please book one of our free consultations at www.lightboxarchitecture.co.uk. Drop us a message or pick up the phone, give us a call, and we'll have a chat. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next video.